Okay. Okay, welcome everyone to our Approach to Carbon Neutrality Waste Reduction Play to Zero webinar. Just some webinar best practices here. Feel free to submit your questions on the panel on your screen throughout the webinar, and we will have 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. You can also access the recording and the slides after the webinar. If you're interested in having the slides in front of you and clickable throughout the presentation, there is also a handout available for you on your screen. And if you're interested in subscribing to the Green Sports Alliance monthly newsletter, there's a QR code here that you can scan and sign up. And I'm going to pass things off to Bradley to get us started.
Yeah, thanks, Shay. Hello, everyone. Shay, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of 4 of the GSA's Play to Zero webinar series, Approach to Carbon Neutrality, presented by the Green Sports Alliance and Blue Strike Environmental. As part of this series, we are teaming up to provide members with a Play to Zero reporting framework and specific strategies to address emissions reductions in the energy, waste, and transportation sectors. The Play to Zero reporting framework is a GSA leadership recognition platform and sustainability performance toolkit that will guide and celebrate progress towards a resilient future for the sport and our communities. So to learn more, please visit the link posted in the chat. Next slide, please, Shay. Thank you. Oh, there we go. So today we are examining the true framework of zero waste with Chris Batterson from Rubicon and Kristin Cushman from Blue Strike Environmental. And then finally, we will be wrapping it up with a case study from Mercedes-Benz Stadium presented by Andrew Bohanko. So Kristin Cushman is the Chief Executive Officer of Blue Strike Environmental. She's based out of Monterey, California. And Blue Strike Environmental manages sustainability, climate, and energy programs from start to finish. Chris Batterson is a key account manager for the construction projects and events at Rubicon. And Rubicon is a certified B Corporation whose mission is to end waste by helping its partners find economic value in their waste streams and confidently execute sustainability goals. And then lastly, we have Andrew Bohanko, who is the sustainability coordinator at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And Mercedes-Benz Stadium is a LEED Platinum certified sports stadium striving to divert 90% of all waste and leveraging renewable energy sources. So, and then myself, my name is Bradley Vogel. I am the Senior Manager of Member Services and Events at the Green Sports Alliance. I'll be moderating the panel today and leading off kind of the conversation for the first few slides to kind of set the high level tone. And then I'll pass it to Kristin to kind of hit some like high level, best practices of how to approach sustainability programs before Chris jumps into his section, and then Andrew after that for more of a Q&A session. So again, as Shay mentioned, feel free to enter your questions into the chat as we move throughout this presentation. And again, we will be sharing it post webinar. So with that, Shay, we can go ahead and jump to the next slide. All right, so really what we're looking at here is holistic thinking towards a circular economy. So we have one graphic on this page, and really this is just to get your mindset wrapped around what the idea is behind waste management. So currently in the waste paradigm, we are aiming to move towards that circular economy, and our panelists today will go into this more in depth. But there are unique challenges that come with that in terms of sports facilities, etc. So we are going from a linear economy where inputs don't ever have an output, things just get more or less landfilled, trashed, incinerated, things like that, to where we're looking for now is outputs that can become inputs once again. So there's no sustainability is a journey, especially when it comes to the waste side of things. It's so regionally dependent. It's so focused again in regional aspects. Shay, there we go. Next slide, actually, because I think it ties into what I'm going to say next. So with that, before handing it off to Kristin, we talked about going from a linear to more of a circular economy. Again, trying to make outputs inputs, and then from a high level, we look at the waste hierarchy. And this is the waste hierarchy as defined by the True Zero certification framework, which is the most, I would say the most well-known net or true zero certification out there right now for zero waste. So we start at that redesign level, excuse me, the waste hierarchy goes from most to least preferable. It starts with the redesign of your actual waste system. So you look into the right sizing of your containers, restructuring solid waste collection agreements with your haulers, reviewing your points of generation, and then completing a review of the supply chain. Then we look into the next stage, which people are much more accustomed to within the traditional waste framework, where we're used to the reduce, reuse, recycle. Now we're looking at adding the redesign and re-earth as a part of that. So again, we get to the reduce section. Most of the people on this should have some idea what that means. It means eliminating waste before it gets into the waste stream. So how can you take stuff out before it eventually becomes waste? And then we have reuse, which is using those materials for a similar or another purpose that it can be reusing those materials over and over. So, pallet and shipping containers reuse, reusable transport containers, reusable or durable foodware for sports venues. When you're in premium areas, you'd rather use cutlery, things like that. And then we get to the re-earth, which is more or less that compost level. And then finally, recycling, which is at the lower level of the hierarchy, still very preferable compared to landfilling and stuff like that. But again, I just wanted to set kind of the overall tone of what waste looks like, what we're striving for. We're striving from that linear to the circular economy. And this is kind of how we frame where the waste diversion strategies go. So with that, I will pass it over to Kristin Cushman, and she will touch very quickly, or not very quickly, on the most important of 5 to 10 key success factors for creating a sustainable venue. And someone had sent this question to us prior to the webinar, so one we wanted to address first and foremost. So with further ado, go ahead, Kristin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I think I'm going to try to follow along your lead, Bradley. So there's a lot more than just 10, but I kind of put together what I would consider a pathway for planning exercises. So the first thing that Bradley mentioned is redesign. That is a very critical piece. How are your dumpsters? Where are they placed? What size? How accessible are they to stewards who are bringing the bags? And so in order to do that audit and to create that redesign, one of the most important things is to hire a sustainability coordinator for your venue. If it's not a separate person, it would be really imperative that one person is designated as the sustainability lead, and oftentimes that lives within facilities, which makes sense. So that's kind of a first place to start. Who is going to redesign and track the waste stream throughout the whole process, the circular process? The second thing is to consider establishing a green revolving fund. I spoke a little bit about the green revolving fund in our first webinar. So again, if you wanted a copy of that slide deck with some of the links that were attached, please let Green Sports Alliance know. But basically, a green revolving fund is as you're buying new products or creating energy efficiencies, as you're doing things that are saving your venue money, you would capture that savings and put it into a separate checking account, basically. And then you could use those savings to hire a sustainability coordinator or to buy products that are more sustainable that might be more costly. So that, again, if you have questions, I'm happy to walk through that with you. The third thing is to have a structure. The sustainability coordinator is going to need to have a structure, a framework in place, and that starts with policies and procedures. So as you're redesigning the way that the waste is flowing through your venues, you should be attaching policies to make sure that that framework stays intact. The fourth thing is tracking annual performance. So I'm sure most of you are doing that with diversion. I know the Play to Zero framework helps with energy and water. So I would recommend making that part of the structure. And then moving into more of the implementation side, Reducing waste, obviously that's the topic for today. I'm going to touch on a few other things as well, but reducing waste is fairly easy if you sit down and think about how to redesign the framework. Looking for localized food partnerships, whether that's directly with farms or local farmers markets or what have you, that is a great way to get non-packaged food into your venues. And then obviously to set up food recovery programs. So partnering with a food bank who can come in every day after an event and take that reusable, edible food from your kitchens and pass it down to a pantry. Working with vendors to reduce packaging. As the stadium, depending on the size of your stadium, I mean, you have the power to kind of dictate what comes through your venue. So I would recommend starting with 1 or 2 items per year and really just having those conversations with vendors, coming up with more, less packaging and more bulk items, I guess. Reusable cup programs, I think we're all familiar with that, but reaching out to partners like Clean Canteen and serving beer, Coke, or what have you in a reusable cup and charging a deposit fee, and then allowing those people, those fans, to bring that same cup back event after event. That has proven very successful in some of the markets that I've worked. And then eliminating straws and similar swag items, all those cocktail little things that get put in to drinks. So that would be, that would also help if you are thinking about sorting your waste. Getting those small little items out of there would be important. And then I'll just quickly run through 6, 7, and 8. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, of course, are going to be milestones to become sustainable, reduce emissions, transitioning to electric vehicles, and then researching more sustainable procurement practices. So again, there's a lot of resources out there that we can share. And then finally, the low flow water infrastructure, which again is fairly common. And finally, the most important thing to being a sustainable venue is to promote and market what you're doing to your fans, because there's an opportunity to engage and educate fans and create loyalty through these programs. And with that, I will pass it to Chris to get more into the weeds.
Thanks, Kristin. So yeah, as introduced, I'm Chris Batterson, Key Account Manager at Rubicon. We are a tech company in the waste and recycling space. Our full focus is handling waste and recycling for our customers, helping them achieve their zero waste goals or circularity goals, whatever may be established. And at the end of the day, as our motto is, eliminate waste or end waste, right? So getting into kind of an introduction of what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. Just kind of set the table. When we talk about zero waste and carbon neutrality, they're intertwined in the way that obviously at the end of the day, to be able to find outlets for waste materials, to find recycling, reuse, circularity, whatever the goal might be, those are all going to be tied to carbon in some way. And you have to find, at the end of the day, the right balance. So just to set the stage of why we're talking about this, 39 million pounds of waste is estimated to be generated by sporting events across the USA. And that's just sporting events. That's not concerts. That's not conferences. That is just sporting events alone. The lack of space. So according to the Waste Business Journal, there is an estimated 15 years of landfill capacity remaining nationally. Regions like the Northeast, they have half that span left of their permitted landfill space. Now, obviously, we're not going to solve the waste problem probably in the next decade. So there will be some permitting that has to happen. But the pure fact of it is we're running out of space to bury this stuff anymore. Rising costs. Obviously, as space is limited and becoming even more so, the cost is going to go up to actually be able to bury that material at the landfill. So there's been as much as a 10% increase in landfill cost in the last 5 years alone. And that's in, as much of 10%. I think that's on the coast, and then nationally at 6.5%. It's continuing to go up, and it'll only continue to be more expensive to landfill. And then the last piece is obviously the appetite for the public and for the folks that are going to these events, right? A study by Life Tackle, which was over in the European Union, found that 74% of football fans, soccer in our world, either agreed or strongly agreed that they cared about sustainable impacts of their favorite football club. Another survey showed 86% of those fans thought that the football should take care of environmental protection in the same way it takes care of other issues, such as discrimination, which is a huge issue that they have taken on as well. So just to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about, especially when it applies to waste. And then now we can kind of talk about zero waste and carbon neutrality more in some more general terms, and what it'll take to kind of get there going forward. So the first piece it's going to take is innovation. Today, we know that there are certain materials that we cannot recycle. They don't have a reuse outlet. They aren't able to go back to manufacture for circularity. They're just set and designated for landfill. So innovation is going to be a big piece. For example, I'm working with a company that uses mycelium to recycle material, to break the material down over a 2 to 4 week process to make it a bioavailable product at the end of the day, which could then today be used for composting, for agricultural purposes, fertilizer. It's a mineral rich kind of additive to fertilizer for agricultural purposes. It's also being researched right now in terms of being able to be used by manufacturers for a circular solution. And what's really important with that is, as we talk about carbon neutrality, that is a completely organic process. The only carbon into that is trucking the material to wherever it's being processed. To that point, we're looking at whether or not that process can be done on site, which would obviously eliminate that trucking. And then the only other piece that's carbon into that is being able to grind up the material to be able to feed into this process. So, the process itself, unlike most recycling processes today, is completely carbon neutral in terms of it's just organic material eating organic material and turning it into a byproduct, right? And so it's going to take innovators in recycling like that to come to the forefront with these new solutions, these new ideas, and be able to start to kind of get away from some of the carbon heavy recycling and reuse options and some of the other stuff that we do in terms of the trucking, to be able to, again, get to your zero waste journey, a goal, but also have that carbon neutrality that now is becoming even more of a fixture or even a goal for a lot of organizations. The next piece is the collaboration. So that recycler can have a great solution, but if no one knows about it and if no one is actively engaged to try and bring that to a site, to a project, to a location, then there's no use in it, right? And so it's going to take collaboration from not only the suppliers, the folks who are operationally running whatever type of business it might be, in this case stadiums, to the recyclers themselves, to folks like us at Rubicon who kind of stand in the middle of that and help kind of bring everyone together. And in the example of the mycelium, my client was the generator of the material. I had known the recycler for a couple of years and had been interested in trying to pilot that. And then I happened to know a facility in the market where that location was that probably would be a great partner to run the pilot and actually perform the work at their facility. So it's going to take that kind of level of collaboration between everyone to get this kind of stuff off the ground and to move forward with new technologies, new solutions. Again, we got the supplier on board to do R&D with the material once it was processed to see if there's anything they can do in terms of taking that material back and putting it back into the manufacturing process and making it circular. And it's really, until we get to that point where we're all collaborating, and it's not just someone, coming up with a good solution and then trying to sell it, and trying to do it all by themselves. That's how we get over the hump and kind of get new solutions in the marketplace, especially for some of these materials, like I said, that have no outlet today. The next piece would be investment. So obviously none of that gets done without the underlying investment, without the money, the capital to put towards it, right? And so again, giving that example of the pilot we just did with the mycelium, everybody involved, the client, the recycler, the facility operator, and Rubicon as well, all had a stake in that. Rubicon, as a company, we donated $10,000 to that project to cover all of the testing that we wanted to have done to make sure that we had full results on, the toxic elements of the material, any metals, the levels of those metals, et cetera, to make sure that at the end of the day, we could prove it out as a completely, environmentally friendly standard meeting process, right? And so to get that kind of innovation off the ground is going to take an investment again from everybody involved. I think in the past, recycling was sold as something that would potentially be a revenue benefit or generator for folks, and in a lot of cases it can be. But to actually get to zero waste, whether that's however you define that, whether that's 90%, 95%, 98%, however you really truly want to define that, getting to that last 10, 15, 20% is going to cost. That's just where we are today, because these solutions don't readily exist or don't exist in enough markets. So it's going to take investment from everybody involved. And truthfully, I've talked to VCs and other folks who potentially want to get in and start investing those funds and that money into hard to recycle facilities. Asking me what's the general need and what's the volume potential for some of these materials if they were to invest and get one of these facilities up and running, right? So that's a huge piece of it as well. It's just, frankly, it's going to cost some money for all of us to get there. And obviously, if we get there together, it'll be easier than if we're just having people doing this in silos and making investments that aren't connected to the entire chain, right? And so then the last piece of it would be to then obviously track, measure, validate, and benchmark all that work and all of that success, right? And what you're doing today, and then also looking for opportunities for improvement, whether that's with a given material or whether that's from a carbon perspective. Today, we're really talking about the Play to Zero platform, which again is really tying back to this, right? It's a platform where you can get these things tracked, you can get them measured, you can get them validated, right? And you can see how you're doing, not only in terms of your own world, but how you're doing compared to your fellow folks in the sports field, right? And whether fellow stadium operators, how events kind of match up against each other. We do that at Rubicon for our customers. We're tracking carbon savings. We're tracking GHG Protocol 3, Scope 3 emissions, all that kind of stuff, because obviously today most companies and businesses are reporting that now. And the carbon is just as big of a piece, as I said, to the zero waste journey, as anything else, because I think historically what has happened is a lot of people could find a solution for something. Let's say, like right now, I have a recycler in Ohio who can recycle PVC. And I have plenty of clients across the country who have the PVC that needs to be recycled. But when you run the average weight of, let's just say, a yard of PVC, and how many yards or pounds or how many, whatever you want to measure it by, that you can fit on a trailer, and then take the, the 3 miles a gallon that truck trailer is probably getting, equate that into what the carbon output of that truckload would be from, let's say, California to Ohio. At the end of the day, the carbon benefit probably is not there, right? You're recycling, but you've actually output more carbon than would have been output if you had just buried that in the ground, down the street, right? So that's kind of the equation that a lot of my clients and customers are starting to kind of figure out and come to is, we, for a while, it was, hey, can we find a solution for this anywhere? And then B, how do we get it there? And if we do, then great, we've recycled, we've done what we need to do, and we call it a day. Now, I think a lot of folks are starting to realize, obviously, when the carbon impact is brought into it, it changes the scope and it changes the nature of that, right? Those solutions are not really viable from that perspective, right? If you're going to meet both of those goals, there's going to have to be a trade-off, and there has to be, some neutrality there between, again, the savings, the tons saved from recycling versus the tons emitted from transporting or whatever else. We don't even today, I'll say that we don't even measure the carbon output of the recycling facilities that we're utilizing, right? So we have these large recycling facilities that have all this equipment, all these sorting lines, very carbon heavy. And we have really no numbers on that that I'm aware of, that I've seen, that we're calculating into the carbon metrics for even our own customers today. So there's pieces to the puzzle that we still aren't even fully counting in. And so really what I wanted to stress today was, the zero waste and the carbon neutrality are completely intertwined and have to be examined both, right? You have to find that balance. And then, really try to collaborate as much as possible. Speak with your vendors in terms of suppliers, in terms of, as was said before by Kristin, packaging and reducing waste, come to the site, redesign, right? Is there other products we can use in the build? Whatever the case may be upstream. And then talk to your folks downstream, your local recyclers, your vendors that are handling your waste and recycling, and try to get everyone on the same page as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, I think the more people that have skin in the game from every angle, from every aspect of that chain, the better it'll be to trying to really move the needle and get to where we want to be from a zero waste and carbon perspective. So with that, I will say thank you. And obviously, as we said, we have some time at the end to do Q&A, but for now, I'll pass it off to Brett.
Yeah, no, Chris, thank you so much for that context and, background on kind of what the high level waste programs kind of look like. And, I think it ties very well to the overall waste hierarchy where, you talked innovation, which is very similar to that redesign where, yes, you have to start thinking of those next levels up, not just, all right, we have these products in the system. So, but with that though, we'll start diving into more of a case study kind of focus with Andrew Bohanko. So I know we've been getting a lot of great questions coming through, more or less based off of more operational questions, which makes a lot of sense. So I think this is a perfect time to bring Andrew into it. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. First and foremost, I'll start with a high level question. So can you just share a quick overview of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium recovery area and how it functions post-event?
Yeah, so as you can see from the picture there, we're a pretty large facility. The whole Mercedes-Benz Stadium is 1.9 million square feet. Within that, we have a 6,000 square foot waste recovery area. We call it our resource recovery room because we really are trying to send as little to landfill as possible. So within that, we're recycling basically everything that comes down. We're sorting out, hand sorting after an event. So after, let's say, a Falcons game like we'll have on Sunday, about an hour and a half past that event, our sort team will really start going. And as the waste starts to come down from the concourses and the suites and the back of house areas, we have 14 to 16 people that are individually hand sorting across our sorting tables. And those have 6 spaces within them. So 6 people to a table. We have 4 tables down there, and they're going through bags individually and then separating them into bins that will either be put into a compost bin. We have 2 compost self-contained compactors, 1 aluminum compactor, 1 plastic compactor, and then we have individual rolling bins for all of our glass, and then a baler for our cardboard. So we're baling cardboard out of that as well. So within that space, we're mostly focused on those 5 main streams. And then within that, when we're getting things from supply chain and stuff like that, styrofoam, polystyrene, we're using a local vendor called CHARM, the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials, to recycle that stuff. So all of our clean and dry styrofoam is brought to them. Any one-off materials, whether it's industrial batteries, used oil from machinery that we're using, things like that. Antifreeze is all going to CHARM. So we're responsibly getting rid of that stuff, but we're also focusing on those mainstreams because we are getting 20 to 25 tons of waste per Falcons game per major event.
Wow, that's very ambitious. I mean, obviously, from my perspective, working in the NFL world in a previous life, what you guys are doing is super, super ambitious, and kudos to you all. Diving a little bit more into the details, though, are you able to advise a little bit more deeply on strategies for post-event cleanup, so bowl picking with temp crews, more or less? Because as we all know, when we start getting down the chain, the high-level sustainability initiatives kind of can get a little muddled. So what are your strategies at Mercedes-Benz Stadium to train these temporary staff, train game day staff, things like that, and how does that all kind of tie together towards this program?
So with our full-time staff, our training starts with their HR training. We call it our welcome home training here at the stadium. But across all of the Mercedes-Benz staff, the staff that is localized to the United training ground and the Flowery Branch, which is the Falcons training ground, they all do their HR training at the stadium. We take them on a sustainability 101 tour of the whole stadium. So from day one, when they come into the building, they have a 45-minute tour that outlines all the stuff that we're doing in the stadium. We physically take them down to that recovery area, which is a space that most people wouldn't otherwise go to. Because they're in that admin level, in those high level spaces, they're not making their way down to the field level, and certainly not down to the waste stock in a lot of instances. So we want people to see the people sorting, to associate that when they are distributing stuff into the bins that are placed in those admin spaces, it's making its way down and it's being hand sorted by people in that space. So if you're doing the right thing at the top level, then that's making life easier and giving us the ability to sort through stuff faster on the back end of things. In terms of game day operations and third-party labor and training those people, we've done a really good job of training up about 60 people from one of our labor companies that will be doing our sorting post-event. So we have 14 to 16 people that are doing sorting in our waste area post-event, and those people will leapfrog every 7 hours, and we keep them on a 7-hour schedule to keep them fresh, to keep them motivated, to keep them moving through the waste sorting, because it is a strenuous job back there to be doing that stuff. So we started that at the beginning of the year, training individual people, and what we've seen down there is that the people really take pride in the work that we're doing. If they're trained properly and they understand the reasoning behind what they're doing and the streams that they're sorting into and what is ultimately happening to the waste downstream once it leaves the stadium, they train themselves more, and then they train the other people that brought on. So we don't always have the same 14 to 16 people that are down there, but if 10 of the people are returning, 4 to 6 are new, you'll see them down there training each other and training up each other and correcting mistakes individually. And then we use an auditing system to kind of see what is going into the waste bins, what is going into the compactors on the back end, utilizing our waste hauling partners to send us pictures of the self-contained compactors after they've been dumped, to kind of analyze what's coming out of those. For our bowl picks and things like that, we do a 3-pick system now. So within our bowl pick, we have a group of people that's going around collecting bottles and cans So that kind of recycling aluminum bottles and cans kind of piece, those are relatively easy to sort out. Then we'll go to our compost pick, and we'll be picking all compost. And then our last one is our landfill pick, which is basically everything else, but it's really just small amounts of waste that are coming out of people's pockets and things like that, because everything that we're giving to fans within the stadium is compostable or recyclable. In addition to that, we use a different colored bag for that bowl pick. For our general waste that's going into back of house areas, for stuff that's in our concourses, we're using a clear plastic bag. And the reason that we're doing that is so that we can see through that bag and we can see exactly what's in there, whether it came out of a compost bin or a recycling bin. For our bowl pick, we're using clear blue bags so that when those come down to the waste dock within our trains, we know that those are pre-sorted bags, and then those get set to aside so that those are sorted last. So we are constantly working to make things more efficient. And what we found is that if that's the last stuff to be sorted, that's just a breeze. It's relatively easy to get through that stuff, as opposed to some of the commingled stuff that we're getting from certain back of house concession stations or in the concourses, where some of those bins get overwhelmed during that halftime pregame event, where people might start putting compostable materials into the recycling bins. Even though that's a difficult task, you still do see that if the compostable bins are overflowing with waste.
Sure. No, I great things you're talking about. I have a few follow-up questions regarding training. So you mentioned training with the part-time or temporary staff. What types of trainings are those? Are those more hands-on training? Are they visual aids? Can you describe that?
Yeah, so it's both. With our temporary staff, it really is kind of hands-on. The best way to learn how to do sorting, the way that I learned how to do sorting, was back in that waste dock. Spending days back there, you see the same materials over and over. So if you're back there training and you have people that have been back there and know the materials that are coming down, just person-to-person interaction, just kind of self-correction as you see things come through. Nobody's ever going to be perfect at the task. With the amount of stuff that's coming through, you're never going to be perfect at anything. We really want to limit ourselves to like a 1% kind of contamination rate across everything. We do better than that in most instances, specifically with our aluminum and with our compost. We're very careful about what goes into those. The compost, obviously, because that stuff, when the wrong things are put into there, that obstructs the composting process, and it makes it harder on the back end to sort that stuff out. For the aluminum, the reason that we're so conscious of that is that single stream, that individual stream, when it leaves the stadium, instead of us retrieving money for that and getting the money back for that valuable commodity of aluminum, we're donating that to a company called Neutrality, which is an aluminum recycler. And then they're taking that money and they're using it to donate it to Habitat for Humanity houses. So that money is being donated to them, and it's about 3 million cans of aluminum to build one Habitat for Humanity house. And we've just passed our 12 millionth can within our stadium. So we're probably going to be breaking ground on that 4th house soon enough. And we'll be working with Neutrality to get out there and to actually do some of the build as well. So we'll take some of the people that work in that recovery area, some of the people that work in our administration area, and we'll get them out to help out with that home build, to kind of see where that money is ending up and where that effort is kind of ending up for them doing that sorting.
Yeah, no, and I think you hit on a good piece there in terms of sustainability programs, that they're not just internal. It's not just the waste going in and how you remove it and send it to where it needs to go or whatever. It's about like community engagement piece and how you build that out as well. I didn't know that about the Habitat for Humanity, but that's super cool to hear that you're able to, kind of link those two together for a greater good within the community. So
yeah, and just one more thing on the community engagement side. So one thing that we really are focused on and we're trying to focus more on is capturing food diversion. I think you guys talked about it a little bit, but reduction and reuse kind of things. Within any stadium, within any event space, there's going to be food that gets wasted. There's going to be food that makes its way down to our recovery area that ends up in the composting system that we don't necessarily want there, because it's reusable and it's good food. So we work with a partner, Second Helpings, that comes in after every event, and our food and beverage partner does an amazing job of collecting the majority of the food that can be reused. packaging that up the day after, and then we donate that to Second Helpings, who comes in. They come in with volunteers to pick that up after every event. So after every single event that we have, and we have 65 major events a year, they come in and they take that. I think up till now, within the 5 years that this building's been operational, we've donated just about 250,000 pounds of food to Second Helpings with them. But even within that space, there's room for us to improve. There's room for us to find other spaces where we can donate more of that food that is ending up in our composting system, which is getting composted, but at the same time, it can be used to help the community, to give meals to people that aren't necessarily getting those kinds of meals in general.
Yeah, and overall, I mean, food ending up in the compost is the least desirable spot. I mean, take that back. Landfill is the least desirable spot. Within that hierarchy, definitely compost. But I mean, for everyone attending, I mean, yes, you want to look for edible food, try and donate that. If not, compost is not even next. We look at animal feed, then you can compost, because with the amount of energy that goes into food, we don't want to see it thrown away at all. So, but again, that's stadium life for everyone. They do have to make food in advance in some cases, so there's always going to be some level. One thing I did want to mention or ask about is when you talked about the bowl pick, I've heard this concern come up quite often where it'll take more time to do a three pick opposed to like a 2 or a single. In my experience, I've noticed that it's literally about the same because it's still about the same amount of materials. What are your thoughts kind of on what that looks like?
For us, that's how we've always done it since I can remember. We started this zero waste program back in 2018, and at that time, our senior building services manager, she was tasked with the best way to kind of utilize utilize the staff that we have. So I don't think they've added any additional people to that bowl pick. It's just, how do you train them? What are their responsibilities once they get into the building? So we don't see any difference between our between our bowl pick as it used to be and our bowl pick now. The time to do that actual pick is just about the same, and we're able to kind of get all that waste down into the waste stock within a reasonable time.
Got it. No, thank you for that insight. Looking through some questions that were just sent over. So one is very operationally focused. Do you pre-empty any liquid from bottles during the bowl pick, or do you keep the liquids in there when you do that pick?
If the top is off, they'll dump it. Sorry, I'm having trouble here.
You're good.
For cups and things like that have beer still in them or other liquids, they will pour that out into the bowl. Or if the tops are loose within the Dasani bottles that we have, they'll pour those out. All of our plastics end up in a compactor, so that kind of sorts itself out once it gets into the compactor. But we do pressure wash after every event as well, so we're not as concerned about stuff being poured into the bowl as we would if we weren't doing that after every event.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that context. All right, one more question, then we'll jump into more of the higher level Q&A. So how do your partners and corporate sponsors help Mercedes-Benz Stadium achieve the highest diversion rate possible? And I know you already kind of talked about this with Novellus, but we'd love to dive into it more.
Talked about it with Novellus, and Novellus has been a great partner with helping us to get donations to the right places. That initiative has gone back to the old Georgia Dome. Coca-Cola and Delta have also been great partners with us. We've utilized those corporate sponsorships to develop new waste bins within our Delta clubs. So we found that the bins that we had in there, they were coming to the end of their life cycle, and Delta wanted to highlight their flight to net zero. So we worked with them and with Coca-Cola to develop a Maxar bin that we're putting in there, and that's a 2-bin system, and we're working on some right sizing for some different areas. So we found that a slightly smaller recycling bin was a lot better for our system. So within that, we have a 36-gallon compost bin and then a 22-gallon recycling bin. So the bin is a little bit smaller. It's a little bit low profile for those spaces in that premium space. We still have messaging at eye level. So if there's 4,000 people within that space, you can still locate those bins pretty easily, but it cuts down on the size that they are, so it gives more space for fans to kind of mingle around. And then we also utilized that partnership with our Home Depot backyard and bins that we instituted into our Home Depot backyard, which is our tailgating space. It's 11-acre green space where the old Georgia Dome used to be. And that's a good tailgating space and community space where there's a park and a nice green area. We previously just had the 2 bins, 1 landfill and 1 recycling. We've since switched to a 3-bin system where it's landfill, compost, and recycling. So we're going to start to capture that stuff and then be sorting that stuff out as well. But it just gives another layer of kind of education to people before they even come into the building. They see the same messaging, they see what is they're going to see in the building. There's just that added landfill bin because we don't have the same kind of control over the Home Depot backyard as we do with the Mercedes-Benz interior space.
No, thank you for that. And with that, I'll leave you one more question. Who operates your concessionaire? That's the last question we just got. Who's your concessionaire?
Levy Food and Beverage.
There we go. All right, with that, I'll invite the rest of the panelists back in and we'll open it up for more of a general Q&A. We'll try and get to the rest of these questions. So Kristin, thank you. Oh, there you are, right on cue. But before diving into that, again, tracking is a huge part of this. So when you're talking about looking into these reductions, and as Andrew's talking about kind of, you know, not just reduction, but redesigning, those have to be measured. So when you're working with your concessionaire, understanding what they're putting into the system, what they're putting out, these are all things that should be, you know, analyzed and tracked in order to get better. So won't dive into this too much. This is really what our webinar series is about our Play to Zero platform, which is a tool with the GSA to help you track, analyze, and benchmark your energy waste and water. So with that, we'll move it to the next slide and we can dive into Q&A a little bit more in depth. So for Kristin, I have a question for you specifically. And Chris and Andrew, feel free to jump in, you know, as needed. So question is, where does third-party funding for sustainable projects come into play, or what are the potential hurdles for that?
Third-party funding. So I'm going to answer in 2 ways. One is there is potential funding and or resources that might come from the city or county, and your hauler. So Chris could speak to that. Many times the cities and counties in which these venues are located have an incentive to support your zero waste vision. So I would start there. If nothing else, they would have the marketing materials, signage, that type of thing to help support. Third-party funding, I wanted to ask Andrew, how did you incentivize your aluminum recycler to donate in tandem that value from the aluminum? Because normally that value would be put in their pocket. So how did that get translated to Habitat? Because that's a brilliant idea.
So in terms of our aluminum recycler, where we send it to?
Yes.
So that's a partnership that's gone back years before I started. I don't necessarily know how that relationship was developed, but the Recycle for Good program is something that Novelis has done for a long time and is beyond just Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Okay.
They have different kind of implementations where people can do drop-offs for aluminum cans and such like that. Charm is a place, the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials that I talked about, is a place where people can go and drop off cans within that from the community. They also have places set up in different colleges and things like that, and they make individual containers for different businesses if they want to participate in that program.
Okay, great. That is definitely a unique market. The other idea that comes to mind is, and this is another redesign element, but I do work with some venues that capture their bottles and cans and redeem those bottles and cans for cash value. And that can add up annually. So that's another idea if you're trying to look for kind of baby steps in terms of sorting out your own materials.
Did we lose you, Andrew?
No, I sorry, having some light problems as well. So we are looking at the possibility of sorting out our individual plastic bottles and getting those into a circular system with Coca-Cola. That way, that one individual single-use plastic is kind of in a closed loop system. But in terms of aluminum, I'm not really 100% sure.
Chris, do you have anything to add to that high level? And I can repeat the question if need be.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah. No, not too much to add there. I mean, again, I think, you know, if the partnership exists, and again, if you're collaborating with kind of the supply and the generator and the vendors downstream, then I think there's definitely value that can be driven one way or another out of a lot of those material streams. Again, if that partnership exists.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
And the partnership, sorry, I was just going to give up the idea of finding a sustainability or a zero waste sponsor that is specific to the program.
Yeah, go ahead. Or did I miss something there? Might have missed something. Anyway.
Okay,
Okay, sounds good. All right, we have some more questions. I'm going through the questions right now. I'm trying to see if there's any ones from today that work in the whole group. That one's kind of all right. So let's see. So we have one more or less on how to collaborate with private vendors. So how, when working with these private vendors, you know, the third party people, how do you get them to you know, buy into these zero waste programs? You know, it often, especially with, you know, newer products, compostable products, you know, more sustainable products that can be more expensive. So what strategies have you all had to kind of promote your argument towards a more sustainable waste system outside of the environmental aspects, which we all kind of know and love? And we'll go right to left. So from my screen, Kristin, if you want to start, we can go from there.
Okay. And yeah, I think my internet's a little bit spotty. So I would say I've totally lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
I'll go last. How about that?
Yeah, you're okay. Andrew, I mean, so yeah, I mean, private vendors, how do you get them to buy in? So the Levy's of the world, private vendors, things like that.
Yeah, for Levy, it's really a collaboration. They're in our building. We work with them every single day. So kind of showing them the benefits of our zero waste program and how that kind of benefits the community that they live in as well is really the first step. But there isn't a whole ton of buy-in that needs to be done for them because they are on board with our mission from the beginning. For third party kind of corporate sponsorship sides, it's really showing the benefit of having their name recognition within our building, showing the benefits of the things that they're doing, having them associated with our zero waste program automatically puts them kind of a step above a lot of other people and kind of highlighting the things that they want to as well. Coca-Cola is kind of in an initiative where they want to look at recycling as well. So it makes sense for that partnership. Companies like Sweetwater Brewery and things like that, they're very focused on water, water reduction and things like that. So highlighting our water system and how we're reducing the amount of water that we're using within our stadium, it's mutually beneficial for both of us to kind of have that initiative. So looking for companies that benefit from the initiatives that we have, and then highlighting how we're similar and how we can benefit the community and the spaces that we're kind of both occupying is key in doing that. And then utilizing the sponsorship side of what we're doing with that as well, and showing the benefits of having them as a corporate sponsor, and then showing the benefits of what we can do on our sustainability side.
Great.
I can go ahead and go. I got my thoughts back. So if you have a venue that doesn't have the strength in identity as the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you know, I think a place to start would be to what I mentioned before, is to create the structure, develop policies and procedures that are ideal for your venue and try to work as closely, in line with those policies, articulate those policies. And I think you'll see that over time, it will start fusing, you'll start attracting vendors that want to be part of that, as Andrew said, and it's going to happen almost organically. But if you don't have those policies and that structure in place to start, you're going to be less successful.
Yeah, and just kind of to pivot off of what Kristin said real quick, having the policies and procedures in place and kind of having that zero waste program be at a forefront and at the top of the agenda for high level leadership meetings, and then at the forefront of just our visibility within our stadium, people will seek you out that want to be associated with it.
Yeah, and there is a cost benefit to these programs. They're going to be unique for each venue and each circumstance, but if you can have a lens on that and try to identify the cost savings involved in sustainability, that's only going to strengthen your partnerships, show your vendors that there's additional value in not only fan loyalty, but their own brand and product line. So I think there's a lot of angles to take here. It's just, you have to start somewhere, and that's why I always say take baby steps, because it might seem overwhelming to listen to Andrew and say, wow, I could never get there, but you can. You just have to do one thing at a time.
It absolutely starts with small things. When we first opened the stadium, the waste area that we had was 2 landfill compactors back in 2017, and that's all that they had was 2 landfill compactors, and then we were collecting aluminum cans as well as they would come down, but that was pretty minimal. It really took 5 years of innovation, of baby steps like Kristin was talking about, small policy and procedure changes that some worked, some different, a lot of trial and error and a lot of hardship over 5 years to get to the point where we're at. None of this happens overnight. None of it happens in a vacuum. You're never going to get it right on the first try for most of this stuff, especially if you're trying things that aren't necessarily stuff that's industry standards.
Oh, great insight. All right, I know we're getting close on time. So one last thing I'll leave you all with is, if you have one suggestion for the people on this webinar, first baby step, depending on where they're at, like what is your main, if you have to start somewhere, what would it be? Or what's your piece of advice? It doesn't have to be, what's your piece of advice for all the folks out there? Kristin, Chris, then Andrew, we'll go in that order.
Okay, I would suggest doing a waste audit. That means walking around, looking at post-consumer, pre-consumer materials, and pick 2 things to focus on this year in 2023.
Great, love it. Chris?
Yeah, I would say definitely partnerships and collaboration once again. So whether it's joining organizations like this, getting in with like competitors in your market, whatever it might be, and kind of walking through your challenges and what's working for other folks and what's not working, and then kind of using that as a leverage to then go to major manufacturers and suppliers and leverage that volume and that spend together as one to kind of make change. I think it's really about collaboration. It's going to take you a long time to do it by yourself.
Yeah, totally. And we see that with, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where we've hit on that collaboration piece huge. So definitely. And then Andrew?
I would say whenever you're meeting any kind of resistance, always be kind and friendly and be a source of education. That's the one thing coming into this stadium that I really have brought to our green team and brought to kind of the stadium is you always want to be happy and be a source of education for people and not so much shame them for doing the wrong things, but corrective behavior in a kind way and being a source of education that people can reach out to is always going to be more helpful, and you're always going to see more progress there than if you kind of just show people this is what needs to be done and telling them what to do, but showing them why and giving them that education piece.
No, I love it. I totally and 100% agree with you. So, no, I think this was a great conversation today. I know we weren't able to touch on, everything we wanted to touch on, but that's waste for you. There's a lot of facets you can take it. So, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Andrew, Chris, Kristin. You guys are absolutely amazing. Shay, I'll pass it over to you right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention our Green Sports Alliance Summit will be held at Climate Pledge Arena in partnership with the Oakview Group in June. So dates will be announced soon, and you should see that come through your inbox before the holidays. But thank you for attending today, and everyone will receive a recording of the webinar, and you can download the slides as well. So just email us at info@greensportsalliance.org if you have any questions, and sign up for Play to Zero with that link in the chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.